Hey everyone, I'm Ty,
And I'm Jess,
and we're
the peculiar couple.
We're here to talk faith, family, and life as Latter-day Saints, embracing what makes us different and why that's a good thing. Thank you so much for listening. Let's get into it. Hey, what's up, everyone? Thank you so much for joining us again for another week on the Peculiar Couple. I'm Ty, and this is my wife, Jess. This week, you've probably noticed something else, if you're on social media, of course, that there was a big hot topic controversy that happened. If you're familiar with the podcast Unshaken Saints, Jared Halverson had a little clip where he was discussing D&C 25, which is the revelation given to Emma Smith, where he talks about how she's an elect lady and kind of her role in supporting Joseph and just in the restoration generally. And he was talking about this, and he mentioned how he's very much a historian and a scholar around why people leave religion. And he was mentioning that he had seen a survey where it talked about how like women are leaving the church more than men right now. Like I think it was done in 2023, this survey. So it's recent. And he kind of just starts commenting on it and commenting about how like we really need the strength of the women in the church. And it reminded me of President Nelson in 2019, Spiritual Treasures, I think was the name of the talk, where he talks about women and he talks about the priesthood and how women have access to the priesthood through covenants. And he I think there's a quote in there. He talks about how we cannot lose the moral rectitude of our women. If we do, like, we're screwed. Like, that's not good. We cannot lose that. And so essentially, like, that's what Jared Halverson is saying is like, women, saints, we need you. We absolutely need you in the church. And this just absolutely blew up in his face. He's even since done an apology video, which, I don't love. But
sad that he had
it's sad that he had to do it. It's sad that he was bullied into doing it. I love the man. I think his heart is absolutely in the right place. I hate that he was bullied into having to do that at freaking 2 a.m. Like, oh, it hurts my heart. But anyway, all that to say, like, we kind of just want to comment on this and comment on the idea of, and granted, I don't want to like straw man these women that are a little bit upset. I don't want to like straw man their argument. But they're upset that they're not getting leadership opportunities and authority and power. And I don't know, all these things. Like they're not able to be ordained to the priesthood. They're not able to have certain callings like being a bishop, for example. They're not able to be in those callings that have you up on the pulpit. And they're just, they're very upset about this. They feel like their voice isn't heard. And so anyway, they just really went hard at Jared Halverson in the comment section and put him in a bad spot mentally. So anyway, I'm obviously as a man, I watched a video where they were kind of just responding to this. And one of the women actually commented this, and she's like, I just kind of feel like he was kind of dead if he did, dead if he didn't, like respond to it. Okay, if you're a man and you're like, okay, no, I'm just going to like kind of step up and say, hey, no, this isn't okay. Well, you're a man, you're being oppressive, like it's the patriarchy, all this stuff. Like you're damned if you do in that sense. And then if you don't, and if you apologize, then it's like, you kind of can't win. Right. And so she mentioned how like, it's because in a large sense, it's because he's a man. Like you kind of can't really respond because it feels like you're just telling now women what to do and how to think and all this stuff. So all that to say, you're obviously the perfect person to be commenting on this as my wife. And so I'm curious to hear from you in your experience growing up in the church, been in the church your whole life, an endowed member, all these things, right? What's been your experience? Have you felt oppressed as a woman in the church?
Absolutely not. I have never felt oppressed. If anything, I have felt strengthened and built up. I've been taught from a young age. I think my value as a woman and as a child of God, and I have been given so many opportunities for leadership, more than I have been comfortable with.
Yeah.
I've been put on the stand more than I've been comfortable with. And, I just think about from primary age, we're able to give talks
Yep.
from a very young age. And women get to have leadership opportunities and teaching opportunities as young women. And there's lots of opportunities in the Relief Society to serve and to teach. And, essentially every woman in a ward, in a congregation, can be given the opportunity to be asked to speak, or on Fast Sunday, they can get up and they can share their testimony. And so, I think women can struggle with the idea that like they can't be a bishop or a stake president. But there are so many different ways that women get to serve and that I've been able to serve. And I just see it as like a difference between the roles of men and women. And I've never felt like I was less than because I wasn't able to be a bishop. Like I get just as many opportunities as men to serve and to be a leader in different ways. And so I don't feel like it's an oppressive thing.
Yeah. So obviously that's been your experience. It feels like 180, like completely different than what these women are saying their experiences. So what do you think is causing this new trend of lots of women feeling like all of a sudden the church is this patriarchal institution?
I think it's because in the eyes of the world, your value and your worth comes from where you can rise in a hierarchy.
Like
how much
much
power and how much like gratification to yourself can you get, whether it's like from a job, can you become a CEO? Can you
can you rise that corporate
rise
ladder
higher or as high as a man on that hierarchical ladder. And so if you have that mindset and you apply that to the church, then of course, like it's literally not possible for a woman to rise up that ladder.
Yeah.
And so if that's your measure,
and by the way, that's only if you see the church as a hierarchical ladder.
Right.
And I remember a talk, like I don't remember how long ago, but I do remember a talk where it talked about there's no up and down. There's no hierarchy up and down in the church. It's lateral. It is just a role that you are put in of how you can serve at that time.
Yes.
There is not like you're higher up on the hierarchy because you're a stake president. Therefore, you have more power over people. No.
Yes.
You are it's a different position, like laterally.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and it's like God is no respecter of persons. He doesn't value a stake president more than he values
a primary president, or a Relief Society president,
or just a ministering sister.
Correct.
you know, and so I think that there's just that has really been kind of ingrained in us from a young age that like you need to get a job and you need to
and that's just
rise
culturally.
Culturally, like you need to rise up the corporate ladder, and if you can't rise as high as a man, then you are oppressed and you are less than. And I can see how that can be true in the business world. But like you said, it's very different when it comes to the gospel. I think, when I think of serving in a leadership position in the church, I had a very strong sense that like, this is not about me. This is not about my glory. It's not about what people think about me. It's not about how great I am. I am a vessel for the Lord to serve through me. And I remember when I was serving as Relief Society president, I like a lot of the decisions I felt like I was making just kind of seemed random sometimes, like assigning a ministering sister or giving somebody a calling. And then somebody would come up to me and say, how much it had blessed them. And I could just tell that like, I was just an instrument and the Lord was working all of these miracles through me. And so I'm sure that a bishop feels the same way, where he's like, the Lord is working through me. He's working all these miracles. It's not about me and my position and how great I am.
Yeah.
It's about the willingness to be a vessel for the Lord to serve through you.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think of, like, I don't know, they use the word power and they use the word authority a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, in the priesthood, the way that I think about the power of the priesthood, you know, like when giving blessings, a lot of people like by the power of the Melchizedek priesthood or whatever it is, by the authority of the Melchizedek priesthood. And guess whose authority that is? It's not mine. That's God's authority that he happened to just lend me. You know, but it is absolutely 100% his authority. Guess what power is doing the healing or the blessing or it's not me. That is not me. That is his power. That is all Christ doing that work. I just so happen to be that vessel. We are just vessels in different ways to serve. You know, and you mentioned, you know, when you were a Relief Society president, giving out ministering assignments and people coming up to you being like, that was so inspired or whatever, right? Like in our previous ward, I was put as a primary president. And at first I was like, or sorry, not a primary president, a primary teacher. Whew, sorry. Put as a primary teacher. Yeah, I can't.
President.
I know. So oppressive. The worst. I can't be a primary president. But no, like I was put as a primary teacher. And at first I was like, you know what? Cool. I probably could do more. You know, like I felt a little bit disgruntled almost. But that was 100% without question an inspired calling. And I remember talking to Bishop when we were going to be leaving. And I was like, hey, thank you so much for putting me in that position. He's like, don't thank me. That was not me at all. That was the primary president. That was all her. She recommended that you be in that position. She received the revelation that that's where you needed to be. And so I went up to that primary. I was like, you were 100% inspired by the Spirit to put me in this position. This was the best thing for me. I could not have possibly been in a better position. Thank you so much. That's the power that you have you have the ability to receive revelation for other people in your call, like
absolutely,
and bless people's lives immensely. You know, like I could have been like, she's the primary president. I'm just this lowly primary teacher. It's like, no. Yeah. It was a blessing. I got to serve those kids. It was just so amazing. And so anyway, all that to say, I totally agree with that. I've seen that pattern, that exact same pattern in my own life. So like,
and I like what you said about like comparing yourself to the primary teacher. But the thing is, the primary president.
Yep.
But the thing is that the president knows that nothing would happen if it wasn't for all of those teachers. Or whatever, you know, the bishop, like his calling would not get done. It would not mean anything if it wasn't for like even the lowliest, smallest calling. Like he really values the people that are doing those tiny little things, like just the willingness to serve and do anything. It lifts his burden and it makes sure that everybody in the ward is being taken care of and being ministered to. And so that's where I think it comes back to, like, in the eyes of the Lord, that person who's doing the calling that, I'm not going to call it a smaller calling, but like, let's just say maybe a calling that has less responsibility or less eyes, less eyes on them, less visibility or less work from the pulpit. That is so valued in the eyes of the Lord. And to those that one person, even if they're serving one person, it's the impact that they're having. It's not about where they are in the hierarchy or how many people that they're preaching to or whatever. You know, it's about authority. What is the impact on even one person?
Yep, totally agree. Like, couldn't agree more. And by the way, that's another in the comments section of that Jared Halverson post. It was like, that was another thing you mentioned, like the visibility being on the pulpit. That was actually the sentence, the primary sentence that got him like in hot water was like, he mentioned how like women are the strength of the church, always have been. And in the Church of England, like, I think that's the one that he mentions, like that was the power of the church was with the women. And he says, not necessarily,
Sorry, I can't stop staring at that fuzzy on your hat.
he says, not necessarily on the pulpit, but in the pews. Women were the strength. Men, they fluctuated, but the women always came. They were always in the pews. And that line right there,
Yeah.
of being in the pews rather than on the pulpit, that's what, like, man, the feminist types just went crazy over that one. And so, yeah, you mentioned like the visibility, but like, I personally think of what Christ said to his apostles. Like, if any of you want to be great, if you want to, be the greatest among you, you will be the servant. You will be the lowliest, whatever he says. Like, that's true leadership. That's the Lord's pattern. It is not about being this visible person. It's not about, having this power and authority over people. Like, that's not it. You are to serve. Like, you have a desire to serve more. Okay, great. You're going to be put in these roles to serve more, but that absolutely does not mean that you have more power and more authority, and just because it's more visible, that means more to the Lord or whatever. Like, that's not how it works at all. And so, yeah, like, it's almost, the Lord cares so much, and he always says this, like, leave the 99 and go for the one. Go be personal with people. Don't worry about being visible. Go to people and just serve them. Like, that's all you need to be worried about, is serving people. Don't worry about how visible that is and how much, notoriety you're getting for being a bishop or whatever it is. Like, if that's your mindset, I'm afraid to tell you that in D&C 121, it very much condemns that type of behavior. If you are using unrighteous dominion, if you are doing this for the praise of man, amen to the priesthood of that man. Amen to your priesthood if that's your mindset and if that's your motivation. And so, like, that's pretty heavy, and so, like, you absolutely need to serve with kindness, meekness, all love unfeigned, all of those descriptions that it gives in D&C 121. That ought to be your mindset. That ought to be what we're striving for.
When I was young, my parents got divorced, and I was raised by my dad. And I believe I was around 5 years old when that happened. And my dad really wanted to move, but he felt very strongly impressed that he needed to stay in the ward that we were in the house that we were in.
But he wanted to move, but then he felt really impressed that he needed to stay in the ward. Yes,
because, when divorce happens, there's rumors, people talk, so he just kind of wanted to move and get a fresh start, but he felt very strongly that he needed to stay. And the women in our ward stepped up in amazing ways, and they arranged to take us to school. They would take me to basketball practice. Like, I don't even remember because I was so young, but I know that they did so much for me and for my sisters. And, like, my dad was working full time. We didn't have a nanny or anything, we really relied on, and I remember having babysitters all throughout the neighborhood. I was at, this woman's house on this day and this lady's house down the street the next day. And it was like, I was kind of raised by my neighborhood moms.
Interesting.
And
takes a village.
It literally was a village that helped my dad to raise us. And they weren't women that were in front of the pulpit or necessarily getting praise. Like, if anything, it was probably to their detriment that they, it was an inconvenience for their day that they had to go and do that, and they weren't getting recognition or maybe just a thanks from my dad. And so it's not like they were getting that same recognition, that
notoriety from man, right? Yeah.
That a man would get. But I look back at those years and I'm like, I don't remember what the bishop said or what the stake president said. I remember who they were, but, like, I'll never forget the impact that those women had on me and my sisters. And I think the same thing about, like, my young women's leaders, and they were just mothers to me when I didn't have a mom there. I didn't have that like presence and influence in my life, and they really helped to fill that. And so I think we really underestimate the power that a woman has to care and nurture and to minister to the individual, not that men can't do that too, but I think that really is like a woman's superpower. And just kind of growing up with the absence of a mom, I've really learned to like pay attention to that power and that value that women have. And, you know, I think about the bishoprics that I've had throughout my life and the stake presidencies, and there have been some amazing ones, and they've had a really strong impact on me, and they've cared about me, and they've strengthened my testimony. But the ones who really impacted me were their wives. They're the ones sitting in the pews with the people who don't have a friend, who don't have, like, they're the ones who are really like heart to heart checking in on how you're doing. And I think there's like, you know, bishops are married and they're trying to check in on everybody, but they're also trying to respect their wives. And, you know, there's just a certain level of like, intimacy connection that you can't really have with like a male leader.
Yeah.
That you can have with their wife, that like they can really sit down with you and like really check in on your well-being and like have a 2-hour heart to heart with you if you need, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, I think you can go and you can like obviously sit down with the bishop and you know, set up a meeting and like talk about things in your life that you need to talk about. But I just feel like the wives really had an impact on truly making me feel seen and loved and like cared for. And so, yeah, it's like, they're not up on display and they don't have they're not ordained to the priesthood, but like, that doesn't mean that their impact on every individual is not as great as their husband's impact. And it's the same thing, you know, when I was serving as Relief Society president, I had to meet often with the stake, what do you call that? The Stake Relief Society presidency. That was the most like spiritual group of women I have ever encountered. Like every time you entered into the room with them, you immediately felt the spirit because they had so much spiritual power. And those are the women that I remember being more influenced by than necessarily the stake president. And I'm not saying that like the women are better but
Different
just
roles.
because they're not up preaching from the stand as much as their husband does not mean that their impact is less than or less valuable. And I think also just another thing I would say is I think men and women have different trials. And one of the trials that women might have is that we do a lot of service and we don't get as much recognition. We don't get to climb the hierarchy and have that like that maybe prestige or that status that some of the men in the church might have. But I think that is allowing us to develop true Christ-like service, to serve without being seen. And I think men have the trial of being seen
but
and,
not letting
and
it go to your
having to
head.
be humble
Yeah.
and having to say, this is the Lord, this isn't me. Like, I just think we have different challenges and different struggles. And like, yeah, I get that is going to be much harder for certain women, especially someone who does identify, you know, with the feminist mindset. That's going to be harder for them. And so I think that's going to take a lot more prayer and like really having a heart to heart with Heavenly Father for them to understand why this is the way that the church is structured and like why they don't have that opportunity. Because I think that the Lord will help them to understand and to feel better about their role. Because if you're just trying to understand it intellectually, I think that you'll never quite get to that point of like, this makes sense. I'm never going to have the priesthood.
So it's like if you're trying to understand it from the perspective of the world, it's all about hierarchy. It's all about the corporate ladder. It's all like, that's the world. If you're trying to understand it from that perspective, it's never going to make sense to you, because that's not how Zion is set up. The Zion is we all have stewardship over something, but we are all equal. We are all one. We are all of one mind and one heart. You know, it's like We are working as one. We just happen to have different roles to elevate everybody and make sure that there's no poor among us in spirit or in, like all of that. We just have different roles in Zion, but we are supposed to work together as one. And so like this whole pitting women against men or men against women, like you're wrong from the beginning. If that's what you're trying to do is pit women against men, like fallacy from the beginning, It is not about that. It is working together. In fact, that's how we are required to be together to be exalted. Like that's a requirement, is for men and women to work together. It's like in everything that we do, it's God's trying to teach us how to work together, even though we're very different. Men and women are very different. But one of the trials and one of the things that we need to learn is how to work together, to use each other's strengths to get the best possible outcome and have truly a Zion community. So anyway, very, very cool. So obviously, motherhood is not very visible. I feel like a lot of the theme that we're kind of talking about, it feels like, is how all of these things help us to become more like Christ. And that is, in the end, that's the whole goal of this life, is to learn how to become like Christ. So obviously, like, motherhood is something that men 100%, without question, full stop, cannot do. We just can't, And motherhood is one of those things that's seen by the world as useless because it doesn't have a monetary value that you can put behind it, And so like, or a status, or it's not visible. So talk to me a little bit about like how motherhood has been like a blessing in your life, even though it's not visible.
Yeah, I think just from a young age, I always felt strongly about becoming a mom, and that was not because the church was shoving that down my throat. They really weren't. And, there were talks every once in a while about the value of motherhood, and I was encouraged to get my education, and I think women are encouraged to, I should say they are not discouraged from, having a career. And I just kind of had a sense from a young age that I was not going to be married young. And therefore I pursued my education and started pursuing different jobs and stuff. But all through that time, I never could get myself to like feel a strong motivation to be very passionate about pursuing a specific career, because I always just had this gut feeling that like my calling in life was to be a mom. And I'm so grateful for the church, because the world tells women that being a mom is not valuable, and that to truly have worth as a woman, that they have to have something more than that. They have to be a mom and have a career. And not to say that that isn't noble and valuable to have both if you so choose, but if you do just want to be a stay-at-home mom, that is one of the holiest and highest callings that you could choose. And so I'm grateful that I've always felt that way about motherhood. And then again, going back to growing up without a mom, I know what it was like to constantly feel the absence of my mother. And I feel like a lot of people really took their moms for granted. Like a lot of my friends would complain about their moms. And I just wanted to say, you are so lucky. You have no idea what I would give to come home and have my mom give me a hug, ask how my day was, and be cooking dinner or and so I always wanted to be able to be that for somebody, to be able to be a mom that was present for my children. And so I feel like since, it didn't come soon, but when we did get married and, we were able to have children pretty quickly, but I just felt like as soon as I became a mom, like this is what I was born to do. This is ennobling and this is great. And yes, it is so hard and nobody sees what you're doing, and you are doing the hardest job in the world every single day, and you don't get recognition, you don't get status. Like you're, if anything, you're just kind of seen as like, oh, you're just a mom, you know? But then you see the impact that you have on your children, and you get to see the little things that they learn, the little growths every single day. And if you're not there every day, you miss it. And that is the most wonderful thing in the world. And I think, we're kind of taught that if you sacrifice yourself for your children, that is a bad thing. And I'm not saying that I think you should give up yourself in the sense that you should give up all of your hobbies or
No
I know that, some women, they really like working and they really get like joy and value from that. So I'm not saying don't do that or don't have a hobby or like something that brings you joy, but it is not a bad thing to be like Christ and sacrifice yourself to raise another human being, to like raise the best human being that you possibly can. And just the relationships and the bond that you have by being there with your children every single day is just like, it can't be replaced. And, you can rise up the corporate ladder and you can have the money and the status and the title and all of that. But I just don't think that will ever bring you the same meaning to your life that sitting there holding that child, like giving them everything that they need, the meaning that gives you, even though nobody else sees, like it's just, to me, it's uncomparable. And I know other women have different experiences, but that's been my experience.
Yeah. Greater love hath no man than this. Then he lay down his life for his fellow man, right? Like that is the greatest love is anybody, but mothers have one of the best opportunities, if not the best opportunity to do exactly that in this life is to lay down your life for your children and to sacrifice for them. But also, men, we need to step up. We need to sacrifice more. Like we just need to work together. It's not it's never this you against me or whatever. Like you have a role, I have a role, and we're trying to fulfill that role to make sure that we are the best family unit, that we're becoming like Christ, and we are creating a Zion community with those around us. Like in the end, that is the goal. And so,
and I just wanted to say, obviously all women don't have the opportunity to become a mom. Maybe they don't get married or they struggle with infertility or whatever. But, for anybody that wants to be a mom and is not able to, I would really suggest reading Sherry Dew's talk, Are We Not All Mothers?, where she talks about how Eve was called the mother of all living before she became a mother, and that we all have, every woman has the gift of motherhood. And I think that's what I've been speaking to throughout this whole conversation about all these women, whether they were a mother or not, they exercised the gift of motherhood in ministering and nurturing those in the Word and nurturing me as I grew up. And so you don't need to feel less than as a woman if you are not able to have children.
Yeah, it's beautifully said. So 100% recommend that. Thank you for helping me learn. My literal favorite thing to do is to watch you be a mother every day. Like genuinely, I love seeing.
Even when I'm angry.
Yeah.
Frustrated.
At me, maybe not. The kids, it's okay, but when it's directed at me, maybe not so much. But no, seriously, like I get to watch our kids grow and develop. Like I come home from work and it's like Truman's saying a new word now, or Rosie's doing this new, I don't know, whatever it is. And I'm just like, wow, like I just get to see a daily progression of them. And I know that 100% of that is because of the work that you're doing here at home with them, in the amount of reading books that you're doing. And I know, just like spending time with them and helping them to regulate their emotions and learn how to, I don't know, like all of that, just learn how to be a person in this world. Like they're learning it all through you. You know, obviously when I come home, I try to be as present as I possibly can and do what I can, but like they are spending 90% of their time, you know, like with you, and I just get to see their progression. And I know that that's because of how much love and effort that you're putting into raising them. And I just see the fulfillment that you get out of that. And it's really cool. And by the way, not to mention, you've mentioned to me so many times about like how much you're learning by being a mother, and not just learning how to cook, not just those tasks, but like learning intellectually. Like I don't know, you could obviously speak to that better than I can, but like medically or like all these different things. Talk to me a little bit about like the things that you're, because I feel like that's something that is a I don't know, a stigma, whatever, a fallacy out there, is that mothers are just babysitters. They're just doing nothing, whatever. Like, but you've mentioned you are learning so much.
Yeah. I mean, you, like, in a sense, you're learning to become a nurse, a teacher, a chef, you know, like there's just so many things that you need to know to be a mom, unless you're like outsourcing those things, I guess, to other people. But also I think just, it gives me the opportunity when I do have some downtime to study the things that I want to study. I can study health, nutrition, the gospel, you know, whatever I want to study. And a lot of that stuff does help me in raising them, but it's also just helping me to continue to develop as a person. And so, yeah, I always want to be learning, and I always want my kids to be learning. And you can still do that as a mom. You don't have to be in a career or in formal education
to continue to learn,
be able to do that. Not to say that you shouldn't do that, because I've also gone down those routes as well, and I'm very grateful for them. So
very cool. Awesome. I just kind of feel like, I don't know, this is something, again, you know, the whole theme of this podcast is the peculiar couple. It's being that peculiar people. It's doing things that to the world seem odd, seem different, right? But we do it because of how the gospel is shaping us, and you know, and we get to see the fruit of that and the blessings that come from that. And so, I don't know, in our personal lives, we've seen a lot of it. We've seen how like prioritizing those things and valuing those things as high as we possibly can, like we've absolutely seen the blessings that flow from that, and the fulfillment, and I don't know, just all those things. And so, yeah, I don't know. This was awesome. Thank you for helping me learn more about this, because, you know, I'll be honest, sometimes I get a little fired up about this. You know, the feminists going, you know, doing their thing. I get fired up about it, but I want to learn. I want to learn from women and you know, the blessings that you've seen of living the gospel and you know, being a woman in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Well, thank you all again for joining us for another week. Really appreciate it. Genuinely, like, really appreciate your guys' anybody that's watching this. It blows our mind that anybody actually wants to sit and listen to us. So thank you. Comment in the, you know, whatever, if on YouTube, whatever it is, you know, with the blessings that you've seen, or, you know, if you've had a different experience, comment, let us know. We'd love to hear it. So, but anyway, thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate it. We'll see you next week.
Stay peculiar.
Thank you so much for hanging out with the Peculiar Couple. Remember, being different is a good thing, so embrace it, live it, and love it. Until next time, stay peculiar.